Welcome to This Week. And this week, at this stage, we're going to talk about what's expected from your research methodology chapter. So you've written your lit review, you've got your research questions drafted, and now you've got to think about, well, what do I need to write in my research methodology chapter? So I'm here with Deirdre to talk about that. So thanks, Deirdre. So we've had a bit of an issue, I suppose, in the last few years that we're starting to question the structure of these sorts of chapters and what students are giving us. So, what should be in a research methodology chapter?
Okay, the two things that should be in a research methodology chapter are a description of the research process that you've undertaken and a defence of that process. In other words, why you did things the way you did them. They're the main two things. Unfortunately, what we have seen in the past, and people will see this in the library, is sometimes people write extensive lists of advantages and disadvantages of all kinds of different methods. We know that. We don't need to be told that. What we need is application to your particular project. Okay? So, in the first instance, describing how you did your project, you literally include a section on how you went about your secondary research, your overview of the literature, what particular tools you may have used, moving on then to describing your philosophical approach to research.
So what do you mean by a philosophical approach to research?
Well, we had a discussion about this in research methods at second lecture, and essentially you've got to decide, what are you? Are you more likely to be a positivist or an interpretivist? And a positivist, certainly somebody who will focus on numbers, who will analyse findings based on statistical techniques, and an interpretivist really who deals more with words and trying to interpret what the different responses in an interview or maybe a focus group are about.
Okay.
Broadly speaking.
So they need to be telling us that up front as
Absolutely.
to where they stand.
And it's sort of a cascade effect. You define your methodological approach, and then you define your philosophical approach. That informs what kind of broad methodological approach you take. Then your actual methods and your tools come into play, and it's really taking time to discuss with your supervisor and to explore each of those different areas. And so that we can understand the logic in why you've done what you've done.
And the key thing really is that they need to justify why they've done it.
Justify.
So if they decide that they're going to do quantitative research, they need to tell us why quantitative research is the best tool for what they want to do.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes it's difficult at this stage to say that you know why, or maybe you've decided with your supervisor that this is the best way to go. And sometimes you can make a case, an equally compelling case for either approach. But we need you to come down by and large in one, and there's certain room for mixed methods, but by and large you're going to come down in one in terms of one approach. So really, I think at this stage you almost have to imagine yourself as a salesperson, and you're selling your approach, and you're trying to get across to people why you've undertaken this. Now, we do allow you the opportunity to change those views somewhat through the process, but at this stage we want to get you to consider all of the different approaches as we've discussed them week on week in research methods, and see what applies to your particular idea.
And it's important as well, isn't it, if you've decided that you're doing qualitative research, we don't need pages and pages about quantitative research.
No.
We don't want
absolutely.
that.
No. You make the decision early on. It's a qualitative or a quantitative approach. You don't need to go into that kind of detail then in terms of each individual method and tool for gathering information. No.
Okay. The other thing that's important is that you have the research questions or aims and objectives, don't they?
At this stage, and I would encourage people, I think you can have quite a number of objectives at this stage. I think they could be tailored as you develop your questionnaire or your protocol for your depth interview or your focus group. I think there is some flexibility still here, but your overall area of interest should really have materialised by now.
Yeah, and it would be a criticism I have often of literature reviews when I'm marking and reading my own students and other students is that, and maybe this is me, but I feel that you should be finishing your lit review and that the reader's really clear this is what the gap is, and that they nearly know themselves what the research question is going to be. So even if it sort of vaguely appears nearly in that last paragraph, and then it's what you're starting with in your research methodology.
Absolutely, because then you're beginning to understand more clearly the context for the discussion in the research methodology chapter. I suppose, Ziene, we've talked about these things, and I like to see a really, really full explanation of what's going on, particularly for qualitative research, how long these chapters should be. And I suppose really we could be talking in terms of 2,008 pages to 10 pages.
Yeah, 8 to 10 pages tends to be what we see.
That's yeah.
But isn't the issue, because this was actually brought up by the external examiner last year, you know, is that it's what matters is what's in that 8 to 10 pages. If it's 8 to 10 pages describing all the various methods that could ever have been used for any type of research, that's no good.
That's juvenile. It's not something that's acceptable.
It should be 10 pages about specifically what your research is.
Absolutely, absolutely. And defending it very strongly, justifying it, as you say.
And even maybe when they're writing, you know, when they're writing, start to sit down and write the chapter, write on a piece of paper beside you, defending and justification, and make sure that's what you're adhering to.
That's a really good idea. You know, the truth of the matter is, it doesn't take a couple of thousand words maybe to defend your position, but you need to be pretty clear on what your position is in a very succinct, very clear way, and then you can expand on that, and you can go out and get support in the literature, because again we would require literature to support your decisions. Again, through the research methods course they would have been referred to various texts and various readings, and they can use those and others to defend their situation.
And it's well to think about what they're using, isn't it? Because we always get the same references, you know, that the whole chapter can be based on Mottiar and nobody else. So again, to be thinking broader.
Try and look around. There's plenty of material in the library. There really are.
Yeah. And I think probably the last thing we need to say as well is that when they're thinking about how this chapter looks like and what it should do, to look at the ones that we've said are the best ones, so the ones that are available on web courses. Don't go to the library and just pick one off the shelf.
Absolutely.
Because it could be the one that's, you know, the very bottom grade that's on the shelf. And really what you want to be doing is looking at the best.
You absolutely do.
The 6 or whatever it is we have up on web courses now are all good examples of
very
good research
examples.
methods chapters.
Absolutely. So I've strongly advised people to look to the web courses examples first, and just to avoid that simplistic, actually irrelevant description of pros and cons of individual methods, you know.
Okay. Thanks very much. So hopefully that can be a good help for you now as you're thinking about what should go into the research methodology. Just to summarise, really keep thinking about how the chapter is about describing your process and justifying and defending the methods that you have chosen to use to address your research question. Also be sure to look at the dissertations that got the highest marks, which are all available on web courses, because they'll give you a good feel for what a good research methodology chapter looks like. Thanks very much. See you next time.